Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, didn't want to make this video. It's been very, very hot here in the UK. A heat wave for UK standards. Incredibly hot, sweaty. Don't really want to do anything because of how hot it is, and especially don't want to talk about Shedeur Sanders getting speeding tickets, but I've been asked so much about it that I thought I should probably do a video on it. So, as I'm sure most people know by now, Shedeur Sanders, it was reported this week that he was cited for going 101 miles per hour in a 60, which is weird. It always seems to be 101 mile an hour that people get caught doing. It's almost as if they're trying to top 100 and as soon as they get to 101, they kind of, that's it, they're done. But, after the news came out, it was then discovered that he was also cited for going 91 in a 60 a couple of weeks previously. So, 2 speeding tickets in a few weeks. Just saying that out loud makes me question why I'm even making this video, but I digress. It was also reported that he failed to appear in court, although even me as a British person thought that was pretty misleading, as I was pretty sure that you don't get a fixed court date for a speeding ticket in the States. You certainly don't over here, which was confirmed by the police themselves, who stated that he didn't fail to comply with any mandatory court dates, and is paying all of the fines that he incurred as agreed upon. And it was also reported as well that Shedeur had informed the Browns of the speeding tickets before the news came out. So that's what happened. First things first, obviously, I don't condone speeding. I can say that quite confidently. I can't speak today. That's how hot it is. I can't even speak. I can say that quite confidently because I've had a license for 10 years this year. Never had a speeding ticket. Never even had a parking ticket. I can say that I certainly don't condone speeding. Of course, it's a stupid thing to do, and it can lead to accidents. And the faster you're going, the easier it is to lose control. Everyone with a driving license knows this. Yes, some people like to, do have the need for speed a little bit more than others, but even they're aware of that. The faster you go, the less control you have of the vehicle. This is something that Shedeur needs to learn from, make sure it doesn't become an ongoing issue. He's young, as I said. When I was young, I've never had a speeding ticket. That doesn't mean I've never sped, not to incriminate myself, but I've certainly gone above the speed limit. Especially back when I was 17, just past, you're trying to impress your mate, you're in a 60, I might go 70, everyone is, I say everyone, 90% of people I'm sure have done it, and especially when they were younger, when you're at that age, yes, he's, not a teenager, but, kind of throwing that kind of period into the same thing, you're not thinking as much, but that doesn't justify it. As I said, he still needs to learn from it, make sure it doesn't become an ongoing issue, and move on from it. But with obviously all of that being said, give the kid a fucking break, man. I mean, the reaction we have seen, and it's kind of twofold, because of course, it's Shedeur Sanders. If he puts his milk in the bowl before his cereal, it's going to be reported on. It's just, the name brings the attention. So, of course, yes, it's going to be reported on. There's going to be all the attention on something as, basic and as a speeding ticket. But then also it has, the reaction from some Browns fans and obviously some people, on social media, as well has been ridiculous. As I just said, he is young and made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. We've all broken the law in some capacity. I'm sure there are some silly laws out there, shall we say. and that's not to say that speeding is one of them, but we've all bent the laws in some way and made mistakes before. Shedeur has no history of this kind of stuff. He doesn't have a criminal history, doesn't have a history with speeding other than these two things that we know of. He's been praised for his maturity and his attitude since being in Cleveland by his teammates, his coaches, everyone that's seen him and interacted with him. So this isn't a Johnny Manziel and him going out and getting a speeding ticket where you can say, yeah, just another classic example of Johnny Manziel being a fucking idiot. It's not one of those cases. This isn't something we can just point to and say, look, it's another example of bad behaviour. This is just an isolated incident that, I'm sure he would say himself, he made a mistake. As I said, it's going to get reported on. I've got no problem with people reporting on it. I know some people were like wondering why it's even getting reported on because it is that kind of mundane. But, as I said, it is Shedeur Sanders. I completely understand why it's being reported on. Of course, people are going to report on anything to do with him. Completely understand that. And unfortunately, it's just a modern age of social media and clickbait that you just have to accept that people will post misleading headlines and information, etc. And we literally saw, was it TMZ post a headline where the first few words were Myles Garrett beats girlfriend, and I'm sure everyone that read that went, excuse me, what in the fuck? I'm ready to throw my fandom in the bin. And then it's the last words are in a race, and it's just like, do you know what I mean? They know what they're doing with the headline. They know that creates clicks, that creates attention. It's just, as I said, unfortunately, the modern day thing of social media and clickbait. But as for just some of the Browns fans and other people involved, and just I just think it's a bit ridiculous hyper focusing on it and making it out something that, like this guy is a felon. He's not the first kid to speed. He won't be the last kid to speed. Again, I don't condone his behaviour. That's not to justify his behaviour. But it's a speeding ticket. It's not a DUI. I've seen the video of the stop. He completely complied with everything going on. This isn't, it is simply just a speeding ticket. There's nothing else you can take out of it. And from that basis, as I said, people make mistakes, and I just don't think hyper focusing on a mistake, as much as it has been, is even necessary, let alone conducive to or productive. I just think it's a bit silly. Yes, I understand. You can make a comment and say, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that, but move on. Cool. That's it. You don't need to be posting multiple tweets about it, criticizing him, saying that this is terrible, saying this is why he fell into the 5th round, all of this stuff, just more character assessment stuff about someone you've never met, never had any interaction with, based purely off a speeding ticket. I just think it's ridiculous. Most of the people even saying these things, I'm sure if we released, if we were somehow able to access their entire maybe not criminal, but morally history as well, and see some of the things that they've done in their life, I'm sure that stacked up next to some speeding tickets, would look, wouldn't have too much weight to it. So, and yes, I think it is just, again, the Shedeur Sanders thing, but I do also think it's piling on someone that is easy to pile on. That was a lot of ons to say, but as soon as he fell to the 5th round, there was going to be the cool side of the story of he fell to the 5th round, but there was also going to be that negative side of the people that wanted that to happen and were happy that it did happen, that can then use that as their kind of ammo to criticize him. And there seems to be a section of a very small section, don't get me wrong, and whenever I talk about Browns fans in this way, I am only referring to a very, 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 very small section of people. But there are some that I think are just salty that the Browns didn't draft Will Howard and drafted Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round at that spot as well. So are kind of using that to projecting that onto their view of Shedeur Sanders and not giving him a chance. At the end of the day, whatever you think about Shedeur Sanders, whatever you think about any quarterback. They drafted Shedeur Sanders. He's a Cleveland Brown. I'm going to support him because he's a Cleveland Brown. So I'm not going to pile on a Cleveland Browns player for something such as a speeding ticket, an isolated incident. If it becomes a problem and he's getting speeding tickets every other week, then yes, obviously you can start to criticise him. But this incident is not worth the amount of negative attention it has been getting from some people, in my opinion. And I just think, as I said, getting a bit ridiculous with some of the discourse around it. But again, it's Shedeur Sanders. It's understandable. But people are throwing it out there. I mean, with the clickbait stuff, you're always, should the Browns cut Shedeur? So that's just a hilarious thing to even suggest. But some people out there are going to think, he is in a quarterback battle. Everyone knows the situation in the Cleveland Browns quarterback room. Will this affect his position in that quarterback competition? For me, I mean, considering this regime traded 3 first-round picks for someone with over 25 sexual assault allegations, I doubt they're too concerned about a couple of speeding tickets. But all seriousness, it's not going to be a problem unless it becomes a reoccurring theme. As I've said, he made a mistake, needs to learn from it, make sure it doesn't become a problem. And if that's the case, then nobody is going to be talking about 2 speeding tickets come training camp. I'm sure of that. His position in the depth chart will purely come down to how he performs at training camp, nothing else, and certainly not two speeding tickets. So, to sum it all up, again, didn't really want to make this video, but I thought I would just give my comments on it. Yes, Shedeur Sanders made a mistake, was caught speeding twice in a matter of a few weeks. Don't condone speeding, of course. No one should condone speeding. Yes, it's not a good thing. But the negative discourse, some that we've seen, has been a bit over the top. Give the kid a fucking break. He made a mistake again. I'll say that again. He's a kid. Let's see if he can learn from it, grow from it before we start making character assessments about him. Again, he's a Cleveland Brown player. I'm going to support a Cleveland Browns player unless they give me a reason not to. And a couple of speeding tickets as a young kid is not enough of a reason to make me not support you for that. So that's my thoughts on it. That's how I view it. Let me know in the comments if you think different, if you agree, disagree with me, you think it's more seriousness than I think. Then I'd love to let you know. I'd love for you to let me know. Encourage you to comment. I'm not going to argue with anyone about it. It's all friendly debate. But again, if you do think different, then let me know in the comments. But that would do it for me today, guys. It is so hot here in the UK. Every 5 seconds that goes past during this video is more and more sweat that's dripping down my face. Hopefully the camera's not picking most of it up, but I will end it before it starts to become too obvious. So that would do it for me today. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to 1 fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing weekend. Don't speed, but most importantly, go Browns.